Well, how does this come to this geometric structure? Well, if you study the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Incas, all these people, the Indians, all these people, they all did this crazy geometry thing. And they talked about it in various ways. But what is most impressive is that they left very tangible things out there that had to do with geometry. And the things they left out there, if they were little models, 3 feet high with, easy to build, you'd say, well, they must have instinctively figured this out, right? But if they leave behind something like this, it brings a whole new set of questions to the forefront. And that is, how were they able to pull this off? Okay? Listen, I know that you've heard a lot of stories from your schooling about how pyramids were built. And I know that they told you mostly that these pyramids were built in a very specific way, and that's a fact. That is, between, depending on the theory, 20,000 to 100,000 slaves or farmers that during the Nile flooding every year would go and build pyramids. And they built them, and depending on the theories, between 20 and 40 years, period. And all this. And that's all nice and dandy. And you have to realize that they teach this as fact. For instance, when you read in those books, it says, well, the pyramids were built by, not may have built by, nothing like that. It's like facts. And you think, well, that must be it, right? But when you think about it, those people that are writing these facts are not engineers. They're not physicists. They don't necessarily understand what it takes to build things. They don't necessarily understand how difficult it is to get great precision from building with stones. They don't necessarily understand that copper doesn't cut stone. And that so far, copper hasn't been found to be able to be hardened to cut stone, and so on. So they just throw this stuff out there, and because they have PhDs and they're in the 1800s and they can't imagine of anything else, then everybody goes with that. And I assure you, if you're doing a PhD in Egyptology or in antiquity, in ancient civilization studies or so on, and you write a thesis that these were built in any other way, you're probably not going to get your PhD. And so I was really kind of stunned because I started to study it, because to me, I had solved a lot of these issues, but there was something that just kept on nagging at me. It's like, maybe the history of the earth, maybe the history of our civilization is quite different than what we think it is. And if that's true, I want to know why. Because then I could modify my view of evolution to match the true reality of what happened out there. And that could change a lot of things in the way I think of myself and my ancestors and the way things have been done and my place in the universe. So I started to study these things, and I tell you, when you start studying these things, just a little, and I'm in contact with a lot of physicists, so if I can't run the math, I can ask people their opinion and so on. And when you study these things just a little, right away, you're confronted with amazing, amazing data. For instance, the Grand Pyramid at Giza is 481 feet tall. It's built out of 2,300,000 stones in average, approximately. And the base of the pyramid is 13 acres square. Okay? When they placed the last stones on the top of the Grand Pyramid of Giza, which we don't have at this point. You see, the stone on the Grand Pyramid of Giza were ripped out. See, there was a covering on the stones all over the pyramid that was mined to build Cairo in the early 1900s and late 1800s. And so these stones were extremely perfect. The pyramids was much more perfect before. But still to this day, when you look at the immensity of the building and then you get satellite mapping of the apex of the pyramid, the apex is 1/4 of an inch off the center of a 13-acre square base. I don't know if we have builders in the crew here today, but I guarantee you this type of achievement, after having placed 2,300,000 stone, is not anything any engineering firm with all of the money in the world and the technology we have is able to reproduce today. I assure you. We cannot do that. We cannot reproduce that. You have to divide 1/4 of an inch by 2,300,000 stones to be able to get the accuracy of the placements of the stones. It's a very amazing thing. And then by the time they were done, the orientation of the pyramid to the stellar pole and so on, the way the pyramid is oriented and so on is extremely accurate, more accurate than many of our current buildings, including telescopes and such. The size, the enormous size of the building is beyond any comprehension. And there's another issue that's very, very dramatic. There is blocks in the Grand Pyramid, in the King's Chamber. There's 100 blocks of granite that have been hoisted to up to 130 feet of elevation in the Grand Pyramid and placed in perfect accuracy to create a relief of the pressure of the stones above with very amazing engineering, so that the whole thing holds together in a way that that is unmatchable with all of our technology today. There's another problem, okay, in archaeology here. Archaeology is really the art of decoding text, decoding the remains of a civilization, and from these decoding, extrapolating their morses, their behavior, their day-to-day life, and so on. Well, if you follow that path, you would expect that somewhere in Egypt, after having placed thousands and thousands and thousands of hieroglyphs in all the temples and tombs and everywhere, okay, telling us everything about the behaviors of their Morses, like what they ate, how they went to the washroom, what they did, and how they did it, and everything. I mean, they tell us everything, how they made love and everything, right? That somewhere somebody would have mentioned, oh, by the way, we built the pyramids too. Don't you think? I mean, you'd expect that, right? But not one wall says that. Nothing in Egypt says we built the pyramids. Nothing in Mayan country says we built the pyramids. Nothing in Inca tradition says we built the pyramid. You know how they tell you that the pyramids were built as tombs.